Hello there and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer and right this very second I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Joseph de Mambro and Luc Juret of the Terrace get together? That's right. One of us is a French jeweller and esotericist. The other is a Belgian homeopath. We are going to form a new religious movement called the Order of the Solar Temple. We're going to believe in the ascended master figures for the Theosophy who resides in the star Sirius. And after a series of media scandals, guess what happened, Shaughan? We're going to take part in a series of mass suicides. Yes. And while we're waiting on transiting to Sirius, we're going to have a right good natter about some lower league Scottish football.
That sounded like a huge deep dive. Or were they how far down did you have to go that rabbit hole to get them?
Not very far. When you go onto Wikipedia and search for death cults, they're one of the ones that comes up. And believe me, Shaughan, believe me, dear listener, there is rich. I feel like in that scene in There Will Be Blood when they strike oil. That's what I feel like when I come across a new Wikipedia article with devious people that we can mine or extract for content when we're doing this podcast. So there we go. That's just the Joseph de Mambro and Luc Juret of the Terrace. Pretty heavy going, actually. I think there was 4 murder-suicides, 2 in Switzerland, 1 in Canada and 1 in France. But let's keep it light, Shaughan. Let's keep it light today if we can for a change. The bad weather might have decimated the fixture card, but it could not decimate our patented 3-game podcast. As usual, we will be examining 1 game from the Championship, another from League 1, and a third and final match from League 2. We'll have a chat about anything else that might have caught our eye over the last 7 days. Shaughan, you and I were speaking to each other earlier in the week. We recorded, I've got to say, an excellent interview with Chris Aitken, the Stranraer manager. Very grateful to his time for coming on and celebrating the fact he was a Glens Vodka League 2 Man of the Month with us. How did you enjoy getting a chance to speak to him?
Yeah, I was going to say that actually. This is a second podcast. Really enjoyed it. I appreciate the fact that David Cotter from Glens was able to arrange it. I very much appreciate the fact that Chris Aitken was able to spend time with us, and I really enjoyed it. 45 minutes well spent. Hopefully people enjoy listening to it as well. I enjoyed putting it together.
Yeah, absolutely flew by. So it should be, if you're a subscriber already, it should be in your feed. If you're not a subscriber, then what the H are you doing? Subscribe, but go and check it on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and a video version is also available on YouTube. I don't know what Craig Fowler did. I don't know about you. There's times when the audio was a wee bit glitchy and squelchy, but that man is an engineering wizard and was able to make everyone sound really good. So fair play to him.
I was slightly doubtful when Chris came through first time around. It was just that kind of blurry, pixelated, silent. I don't know how to, like a smudge. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how else to describe his picture. But then it did get better. It progressed from there.
I would say it looked like a still image from Bad CCTV and Crime Watch. That we're asking you to appeal
from the 80s.
You know who this man? From the 80s, aye. It's a cold case. Do you know who this man is? Can you help us? Here's his details. But no, we're just joking. Very grateful to Chris, very grateful to Stranraer, and very grateful to the guys at 3x1 and the SPFL and Glens Vodka for sorting that out. Before we begin, unfortunately, we do have to start with corrections and clarifications. If you are wondering what happened to last week's introduction, it turns out that Shamina Begum and her weird husband is the line. Anyway,
the thing is, Fowler now needs to edit that out, so now nobody will know what happened last week.
Fowler will keep it in. If he knows what's good for him, he'll keep it in. But we'll start this podcast by looking at the big game in the Championship between Raith Rovers and Arbroath at Starks Park. Gavin Riley and Dapo Mabudi gave the Licties a 2-goal lead before the interval. And although Scott Brown and Josh Mullen pulled the home side level, Scott Robinson, on his debut, scored late on to win the game for Arbroath. The Rovers are still in 6th place. They have 25 points. But Arbroath, one of the big winners from the weekend, actually, they have strengthened their grasp on 3rd. They have pulled away from Ayr United. They're actually closing in on Partick Thistle in 2nd place. They've got 36 points. Shaughan, I'm very sorry that we're going to have to talk about another Raith Rovers defeat, but you were at the match. Tell us what your thoughts from Raith Rovers 2, Arbroath 3.
I think this game felt like two teams that were on completely different trajectories. And I know 3-2 sounds quite close. I went into it thinking to myself, I think in terms of watching, like we've both been very complimentary about Arbroath this season. I think all of that is based on highlights. Like in terms of, I watch them on a Sunday. Generally speaking, they look really good. In terms of when I've watched them over a kind of period of 90 minutes, they lost 3-0 at Starks Park earlier in the season. The game at Gayfield was 0-0. Neither team was good on that day. So I went into this game thinking, well, in terms of how I've seen them, in terms of like watching them over the course of 90 minutes, they haven't necessarily impressed me, but I do know that they're good. But I still think the Rovers can get something from the game. However, actually I can see why Arbroath are very much in the position that they're in based on watching them on Saturday. Like in terms of, they're clearly very well coached. Like they knew exactly what they needed to do. They have quality in their starting 11. I think maybe unlike, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 teams that don't have this. It's not a luxury, but they don't necessarily have this. But I do think Arbroath have a reasonable amount of quality without the squad as well. I think if they had 1 or 2 players out injured, I think they'd be able to deal with that in certain situations. And I think we're now in a situation where, like you mentioned the fact that they could potentially close in on Partick Thistle. That might actually be more realistic than dropping out of the playoff places altogether based on what we've seen so far. And I know like League One winners generally do very well when they come up, but it's unusual for a part-time team to finish in the top 4. So if that is the case, then Gold and Hamilton and the players deserve a huge amount of credit, and they were worthy winners, A, on Saturday, and B, in terms of the management team for the Manager of the Month award that they also received.
Yeah, I was going to say, they really are on the crest of a wave at the moment. That's nearly 3 months, 1 defeat in 3 months, and that defeat was against St Johnstone. And I think St Johnstone were probably the better team in that match. But the goal ultimately came from a defensive error from young. Who was it? It was Victor Enham. So he'll learn from that. But we're not here to talk about St Johnstone. We're here to talk about Arbroath. This looked. I texted you when we were arranging the games, as we often do. You and I will text each other, like maybe the Saturday night, the Sunday afternoon. Look at the fixtures. What's the most interesting ones, and go from there. But you had said that Raith Rovers' first half performance was absolutely ghastly, with an exclamation mark afterwards. You're not a man who uses exclamation marks very much, so when you do, you know it's serious. And watching the highlights, it looked as though that Arbroath were able to concentrate a lot of their attacks on their left-hand side, down Raith Rovers' right. And it looked as though that the Rovers really struggled to contain them. I mean, the goal ultimately comes, I think it's Jack Wilkie that sort of sets up the ball there to ultimately leads into Gavin Riley. There's Riley hits the post, the play comes down the right. And when Mabudi scores, it's at the back post after the ball's come in on the Raith Rovers' right. Tell us about that first half performance. Was it a case of Arbroath just being very good and very slick, or were the Rovers just not at it?
I would say that the first half was the worst. Certainly, maybe not the worst, but certainly as bad as Rovers have played all season. And I remember when we talked about when they lost in the Fife Derby, and I mentioned that going into the Fife Derby, I was like, right, here's an opportunity to create a wee bit of a gap between Raith and the teams below them and put a bit of pressure on Ayr. And I mentioned the fact that didn't occur. And I also said, when we're kind of getting towards the League One game, I said, when they play Airdrie, if they lose that game, you start to have maybe a different conversation about Raith Rovers. And as much as there's been points where I mean, they've lost a lot of games this season. Only Airdrie and Queen's Park have lost more. I've watched a lot of poor performances. And I've always had a belief that worst case scenario, they'll finish mid-table. They'll always have enough to get themselves out of any bother, as much as it's been a fairly mediocre season at best. Saturday was the first of me starting to suspect that actually that might not be the case. And you've already alluded to certainly one of the weaknesses that they had in that first half. It was interesting that Dougie Imrie made 2 subs at half time. One was Paul McMullen, who started on the right hand side, who I would imagine he was considered a kind of marquee signing when it comes to race kind of summer business. Not worked out for him at all. He wants to try things, and I totally get that. Saturday might have been his poorest performance. Nothing come off at all. He wanted to do things. He wanted on the ball. He got on the ball. Like, he gave the ball away after about 35 seconds, and that that kind of summed up how the rest of the 45 minutes was going to go. It was a really poor performance. So he done poorly, wide right, kind of pushed a bit further up. In front of him was Jack Hamilton. Now, I've stuck up for him for a long time now. Saturday might have been his poorest performance to date. Like, just so static, didn't win anything at all, albeit it was going long, and he's up against like Tam O'Brien and Aaron Muirhead. So that was going to be a difficult game for him regardless. But he's been poor now for 18 months. So and as much as I want to stick up for him, it's becoming harder and harder to do so. Like, you're kind of running out of excuses for him. So both those players went off at the interval. And I think when you look at Raith, I struggled to see another team in the Championship that has poorer forward options than them. Like, you go, so even the teams that you think are in trouble, Queen's Park, they've got Fowler, far better than anything Raith have got. Airdrie, they've got Ewan Henderson, far better than anything Raith Rovers have. Now, you can kind of get away with that. If you've got the poorest forward options in the division, you can maybe get away with that if everything else behind that is decent. I'm now of the opinion that they might have the poorest fullback options in the division as well. You've alluded to the issues on the right-hand side. Paul McMullen was struggling, but the person behind him, Jay Rowe, who has now become the right-back, he is a danger, but that's only because his attribute is that he's very good at winning headers. So see if it's a corner or a set piece, he can win a header in the opponent's penalty area. But he can't take a man on. He's not overly quick. He can't really put a delivery into the penalty box. I wouldn't say he was particularly great at tackling. And he seems to have a huge lack of awareness. Now, that's not ideal if you're a right back. So right away you've got an issue there. But he also needs, like, he's supposed to be creating the width, and that isn't happening. And then on the left-hand side, you've got Ewan Wilson, who played a lot of games for Motherwell last season. He's come in on loan, and I wouldn't say he was a particularly good defender, and he's being asked to get forward. And again, that doesn't really feel particularly fair on him, because he doesn't look particularly comfortable doing it, and he generally gets forward maybe 3 or 4 times a game, and his crosses into the area normally go over the crossbar. So now we have a situation where forward line might be the poorest in the division, and your fullback options might be the poorest in the division. And to be honest, if that's the case, the rest of your team better be really, really good, or you're in a bit of bother. And I don't think Raith's team the rest of them, is good enough to cope with those inadequacies, I suppose.
I found it very interesting that Dougie Emery's post-match interview. A couple of times he mentioned about his players' will to win. And I always think that's quite worrying when a manager's openly questioning that. And he talked about it was a must-win game beforehand. It was a must-win game in terms of we need to win this if we're serious about getting into the top 4. And I think that whilst he was content with the second half performance, it's just that I think he's acknowledging that some of his players are below par. I think he's come in there and just like there's just guys he doesn't fancy. I think it feels like he's not going to be able to do it now because it's the January transfer, and that's a difficult market to sort yourself out in. It feels like he wants to hit the reset button when it comes to the summer, and I think you're probably going to see a lot of players moving on elsewhere in the summer, maybe more so than most other teams. And I think that and what I mean by that is, yeah, I can imagine Queen's Park will churn through players, but it feels like that's just because of the situation the club might find themselves in financially. You know, it feels like the Rovers, it's just there's maybe guys that have been there a wee bit too long, maybe a couple of guys that just aren't quite good enough, aren't fitting into what Dougie Emery wants to do, and he's just like, get some of these boys out of here and let's go again next season.
I don't know if I agreed with that. There was a couple of things I disagreed with. I always think this whole will to win. I generally don't agree with that. I mean, sometimes maybe it's the case, but I didn't get that impression on Saturday. I just thought it was a lack of quality, and I think it's both a lack of quality and too many players who do the same kind of thing. Like in middle of the park, it's generally players who want to win possession and recycle to somebody else. Like there's no real creative midfielder.
Yeah,
that doesn't come down to a lack of will to win. It's because everybody's just the same and they want to do the same job. Everybody in the team is reasonably slow. There's no quick player. Like Richard Chin came on at half time. He's got pace. And then suddenly, as soon as Chin appeared, the Arbroath defence were having to do things that they didn't want to do. Tam O'Brien doesn't want to have to go wide. Like, Tam O'Brien's not quick. Aaron Muirhead doesn't want to track somebody who's maybe taking wide. Suddenly they looked a wee bit uncomfortable, but only for about 20 minutes. I mean, Arbroath were worthy winners, regardless of the fact that Raith done well to come back into the game. So I didn't agree with the fact that it was a lack of a will to win. Or he mentioned the fact that he thinks some players are coasting. Listen, that might be the case. That wasn't the impression. That wasn't the impression I was getting. The other one that he mentioned was, and I thought this was unusual. So the fact that Raith had done well to get back into the game, and I did think at that point, okay, momentum is starting to flow towards Raith. At that point, I did think they would get the winner. But you see, after 5 or 10 minutes after they grabbed the equaliser, I was like, I don't know if it's going to happen here. They started to go long again, rather than, because that second goal was a really good, well-worked move, kind of one touch, really good movement.
Yeah, it's a great goal, brilliant goal.
After that, they kind of started going long again, and the momentum was lost. But he kind of called out Richard Chin. He said he played this was for Arbroath's winner. He said he played was it a World Cup Willie pass? He suggested.
World Cup pass. Just on that, Shaughan, I think that what I found really interesting about this as well, when I'm pulling together my research for these, I tend to I'll write out the introductions, basically a wee summary of what's happened in the game. Then I listen to so before watching the match, I listen to the manager's post-match comments because I just find it helps contextualize. If I've not seen the game, it helps contextualise it, you know. And when he said the World Cup Willie pass, I thought, well, that's unusual. I've never actually heard a proper manager use that term before in the first instance, so that's really interesting. I was thinking, I can't wait to see this. This sounds like a have-a-go hero gone wrong. You know, like where like a dog falls into a frozen pond and someone goes in to rescue it and saves the dog but dies themselves. It sounded like that's what he was talking about. But seeing it, there's so much more play that happens before the ball actually hits the back of the net. There's when I saw Chin trying that pass, I was thinking, is that what Dougie Imrie was talking about? It felt as though to really single out Ricky Chin for doing that, and then loads of stuff to actually happen. I thought that was a wee bit curious. Yeah, yes, so did I. Because ultimately, how Saturday transpired, how Arbroath's goals came about, was ultimately they defended abysmally, and as a like individually, as a unit. I thought they were dreadful, certainly over the first half, and that third goal, but I think it was 10 minutes to go or whatever. Again, a complete failure of, I would say, the defenders, and to kind of pull up Chin. Bear in mind, Chin's been brought on at half time and has presumably been told, listen, we've not laid a glove on Arbroath in that first half. Go in, run at them, get on the ball, take some risks. Like, do something different ultimately. And then to actually mention his name, I don't know if he mentioned anybody else's name in terms of failures for any of the 3 goals. So I thought that was quite poor as well, actually. Not as poor as the defending. I thought for the first goal. I thought that we had to watch it back. First of all, like, really good play from Jack Wilkie down the left. A good ball into the box, and I think Mabudi flicks it into the path of Gavin Riley. Good control, good finish. But when you watch it back, it's Gavin Riley. It's a really, really good run from Gavin Riley, because he must be about 30, 35 yards from goal before he sprints into the area. And he's been tracked by Jordan Docherty. And then all of a sudden, he's not been tracked by Jordan Docherty. And so when that flick from Mabudi goes into him, he's got the time and the space inside the penalty box to control and finish it. And then he hits the post shortly afterwards. Tell me about Riley's performance in that match. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that Riley and Mabudi, who scored the first couple of goals, were proving a nuisance to Raith in general. What was interesting was Arbroath were quite happy to allow Raith as much possession as they wanted. So everything was quite slow. Everything was Ray would roll out to a centre-half would play to a right-back, and then Raith would maybe make 10 to 12 passes across the back line. But see, as soon as they wanted to try and go further forward, it's at that point that kind of Riley and maybe even Mabudi, then they would start to kind of make their presence felt, I suppose. So they were very much the first line of defence, rather than necessarily being, oh wow, that's like I wouldn't say they were necessarily
I wasn't worried about them in terms of causing us a nuisance by being alert attackers, but what they were brilliant at was being the first line of defence. I thought they were very, very good at that. I mean, you look at both their scoring records so far this season, you can see maybe why Arbroath aren't second rather than third at this moment in time. But just in terms of being workhorses and denying Raith, as soon as they got out with the final third, that's where they really come into their own, and that's where I thought they were really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Riley, having seen Riley earlier in the season when Arbroath beat Queen's Park 4-1, and of course he was a short loan spell at Stenhousemuir. What I was really impressed about Riley is just, not to contradict like what you said about Dougan, but like that will to win, just to how aggressive he is defensively. And whereas if you're a defender and think you've got time in the ball, Gavin Riley just right on top of you. And I think that because of his willingness to, I'm not beginning to sound like your dad. There's a tactical element to you're much like a dog just chasing after a ball for no sake. But just because there's some strikers, like for instance, having watched him on Tuesday night, Russell McLean at Stirling Albion, he just wants to hang out between the posts and wait for balls to come into him. He doesn't want to be dragged moving out wide. Gavin Riley doesn't matter where the ball is. He will run after it. He will make things really, really uncomfortable for defenders. And sometimes when you're a team whose tactics and identity is built on like everyone maybe sacrificing their own individual talents just for the good of the team, he's the perfect player for Arbroath. And I think that because he's got those qualities and attributes, that allows the rest of the team to really kick on and really have them the platform to go and express themselves.
I thought what they were very good at was, as I say, allow Raith to do whatever they want. You're not going to do anything 25 yards from your own goal. Then he would put pressure on if they got a wee bit further. And there was a wee kind of 5-minute spell where Raith just couldn't get it out. Like, couldn't get it out from their own half, try to play it short. And that was, as you say, it was probably down to the fact that Riley and Mabudi were putting pressure on them. But Raith were also shooting themselves in the foot. So then what they decided to do was go a bit longer. And I thought it was players like, I thought Harry Cochrane had a really good game, which was interesting because he was a player who, as much as he was stepping up a level, I think there was a number of Queen of South fans that thought, right, well, he's not a massive loss. I thought he was excellent. And I thought Finlay Marshall, albeit he maybe played a wee bit deeper than maybe he has in maybe recent kind of weeks and months, they were the two that I thought really made a difference because Raith just couldn't really get by them at all. I thought they were a really good duo in the middle of the park.
I mean, the comeback, going in at half-time 2-0 down. I mentioned, Mabudi scored just before the interval. It's actually a very well-taken goal. Yeah. I think Scotty Stewart has a shot from an angle. Josh Ray saves it, but then just like flying in at the back post there as Mabudi to score. And I think that as well something that Arbroath are really good at doing. You can, when players are transitioning from part-time to full-time football, or full-time to part-time football, beg your pardon, or someday a really good player can he find like a full-time club? But you can go to Arbroath, like I think like Scott Robinson doing that, Mabudi doing that. I know Mabudi was playing in Belgium, wasn't he, before coming back over? So it might just be, for them, they don't want to be part-time footballers. They see themselves as full-time footballers. Arbroath feels like it's the perfect club to allow you to do that because you get to play at a very high level. You get to play with a very good team. And it almost feels like a halfway house for guys that have just been released from prison to go there, re-establish themselves in the community and then go and kick on. But you mentioned there like how bad that Raith Rovers had been in that first half. The comeback, the goals that the Rovers scored to get themselves into it, excellent goals. I mean, Brown's goal, what a finish. Like just driving through the middle of the park and leathering it into the top corner.
Yeah, really good. Albeit, see when he started his move to, like before he leathered it, I certainly didn't notice at the time. He actually punches it. So see when he goes right, I think he goes in between two Arbroath players. Maybe one, I'm off the top of my head, I'm sure it's two. But he actually punches it. And you hear it, I don't know if maybe it's coming from the Arbroath fans behind the goals. I'm not sure it is. I got the impression it was maybe from Arbroath officials that were close to the camera. Yeah. But there's definitely somebody shouts, handball. No, I did not see that at all. But it's almost like would it be kind of like maybe Gaelic football or something? But he certainly punches it, and
that's what they do. That thing they get spike it up for you.
That's what gets them past the two Arbroath players.
Oh,
but then at that point, so we're 5 minutes into the second half. But even see if Jack Hamilton and let's say it was Jack Hamilton. I know it's a bit of an anti-Jack Hamilton podcast. I don't mean it to be, but see. See Richard. So Richard Chin is, I think at one point he's right in front of him, but Chin just runs away. Like Chin just runs to his left, my right as I'm watching it. And as soon as he does that, an Arbroath defender has to go with him. Then an Arbroath defender falls on his arse because they have to track him. And suddenly there's a wee bit of confusion, and that makes up Brown's mind that he goes, I'm going to smash this, and it's a great finish. But the space opens up. Because Richard Chin is suddenly doing something that the Arbroath defenders don't really want to do. So great finish. But ultimately it was the subs that kind of done that for him, I suppose.
Yeah, and the second goal is really touching. Just an outstanding move. The ball's worked down the right. And it's just the 1-2 touch football is really, really good. PlayStation football. And then Dylan Easton slips in Josh Mullen. Yeah. Very good finish from just inside the box. The way he kind of whips it with his left foot. I think he's got a tiny angle there to sort of bend the ball round into, but McAdams doesn't really have a chance with it.
I don't think it was. I think it maybe looks a wee bit easier than it was because I don't think you mentioned the fact that it was quite a tight angle. It felt like the smallest space that you had to aim at, but that's the way they went. I thought it was a really good finish, and I particularly enjoyed the fact that it was Mullen because there's about 3 people in front of me that particularly dislike him for whatever reason. Yeah. So even though there's a number of players that failed to perform at the start of the season, Mullen, I don't think Mullen's one of them at all. I think his delivery of the ball is very good. Set pieces are very good. He's probably never going to be an 8 out of 10, but he very rarely puts in a poor performance. And as soon as the announcement over the tannoy, and actually 2 things, you mentioned it about the Steny game on Pie and Bovril actually, and I was really disappointed by it. It's just shouts for the crowd.
Oh,
so as much as I wanted Jack Hamilton and Paul McMullen to go off at half time, see when it was announced, there was like a kind of sarcastic roar. Hey! And I was like, I don't think that's going to do anything for their confidence whatsoever. But when they announced it was Richard Chin, there was a big cheer. And then Josh Mullen, and there's 3 or 4 guys in front of us, and they're like, oh, what's the point? He's absolutely pish. So I was absolutely delighted that it was him that got the equaliser.
Very good. Just on that Steny game, there was we'll call on and talk chat. We're Steny was our featured match. We've talked about them a lot. We're not going to talk about them, but we're going to talk about them right now. Just on that, it's like Andy Munro, the East Fife defender. Steny beat East Fife 5-0 at the weekend, and Andy Munro throughout the first half he got pelters from this boy in the crowd. I think the boy in the crowd's like a Hearts is his big team, but he's always at Oakview, weirdly enough. Now I know Hearts were playing on the Sunday, but regardless, he's always at Oakview. And the shouts were just, Andy Munro's a big Hibs fan. I think everyone knows that Andy Munro, the Hibs fan. He's well known that Andy Munro, he's a Hibs fan. And I think this guy was just really giving him it tight, just calling him like a Hibs bastard, calling him a fat bastard. It's like, you seen Andy Munro? Andy Munro's like just very, very fit. It's stuff you wouldn't say to his face. And in the second half, I think the boy had actually been told off by security at half time, basically saying, shut up. And he was very, very quiet actually after the interval. So thank you, security. Got him like a bootlicker. Like, thank you, security. Thank you for that. But then in the second half, there was another boy there who just kept on shouting at Andy Munro. Like Munro had been booked for something. He kept on shouting, Andy, your bath's ready for you. Come on, I'll get a pie for you. And he shouted as well, Andy, do you want a gherkin in your pie? What does that even mean? What does that mean? Like, just an assault on the senses.
It's when they turn around, so they'll shout something, and then they'll turn around with a grin on their face to try and get some kind of acknowledgement from people around them.
The worst thing is if somebody says something and it's funny once and they get that laugh, it's like, that's just going to embolden them. That is just going to encourage them, and you're going to get this for the entire half. That guy just he'd shout something like about like, Andy, I've got the bath running for you. The Radox is in there. Like turning around hoping he's rewarded with smiles and laughter. And it was like, oh, the boys are sore. Listen, I don't want to sound like a smart arse or thinking like I know better than other people, because you can support, like, there's 100 ways to support a football team. People might think that I'm an arsehole at the football, but I find it obnoxious. Like, particularly, I liked Andy Munro when he was a Stennismuir player, and he's quite good at having a wee bit of backwards and forwards with the crowd. He quite likes it, and I think he can play up to it, especially because he never seems to do that well against Stennies, which is always quite part of the fun. But it's when it crosses that line into just being downright nasty, and two, just downright stupid. When you're just like, this is too much. So yes, 100%. I sympathise where you're coming from. Tell me about the winning goal. This is Scott Robinson making his debut for Arbroath. It's the Raith seem to be in the attack. The attack's quite bitty. It doesn't really appear to be going anywhere. Ricky Chin gives the ball away. Arbroath have got a little bit of time to play about amongst themselves, and then Harry Cochrane's able to slip the ball through. The pass seems to come out of nowhere as well, and then all of a sudden Scott Robinson clean through, good finish.
As you say, that there was a lot happening after Chin makes a pass. It looked like, off the top of my head, I think Darragh O'Connor strides out and then heads it forward. So he's now considerably further forward than Paul Hanlon, who's he's playing centre half with. J. Rowe doesn't. I mean, as I say, J. Rowe's awareness is limited at the best of times. I think he could have come across a lot quicker. But there's now this big gap because Darragh O'Connor's strided forward, headed it forward, but it's fallen to, if it didn't go to Harry Cochrane right away, it suddenly was at Harry Cockrane's feet within seconds. I think he identifies the fact that there's now this gap in the middle of race defence, and Hanlon is much deeper than you would want, I suppose, your last centre half. Really good pass. You're right though, it kind of came out of nowhere, and I was kind of hoping watching it, okay, like the fact that like Robinson has only just arrived at Arbroath. He's only been on the park a couple of minutes. He still has a lot to do. He's got a lot of time to think about what he wants to do. Hopefully that distracts him somehow. But no, a really good finish. And as I say, as much as Raith done well to come back, I think they only really had a 20-minute spell on top. And I could not argue with the fact that Arbroath went away with all 3 points.
What I really enjoyed after this was David Gold's post-match interview. Thank God it was David Gold as well for this. And he spoke about, there's a number of interesting things he talked about. Competitive match. He praised the team's character and resilience. He said that, maybe the Rovers could have gone on to win it, but Arbroath ultimately dug in and got what they wanted. Thanked the supporters for showing up. But what I really liked about it, the interviewer was asking about Arbroath's prospects for the remainder of the season, and I presume that is just going to be as finishing high up the league table as possible. I think it's very difficult to see anyone beyond St Johnstone winning the championship. But I wrote the quote out where the interviewer asked him about what he thinks for the next couple of months, and he said, "You have to keep looking up. People get nervous about saying that. Why should we not look up? We're not naive and forget who we are and what we do. We've got to look after ourselves, but I don't want to be looking behind me. I want to be positive and ambitious and see how far we go." And I think that feeds into something that we've said for a couple of months now, where you don't think of Arbroath as this wee part-time team that are just lucky to be there. They're just this team. I know it's only their first season back in the championship, but it's ultimately a very, very good team, very good players, and 2 very good managers. And that's what we have to think about them. They're not this plucky team that are punching above their weight. I think when you look at I think you summed up very well earlier when you just said they've got options from the bench. They can make changes that doesn't necessarily make the starting 11 weaker. There's a lot to like about them compared to Raith or Morton or maybe Airdrie, Ross County teams like that. They're just like a really good team, and they're 100% deserve to be where they are.
Yeah, and I just think they have a perfect mix. Whether it's young players on loan, whether it's a Thomas O'Brien who's been part-time for a long, long time now, whether it's somebody like Aaron Muirhead who's went from full-time to part-time, it just feels like they have the absolutely perfect mix for any kind of part-time team. And I do think they're third ranked now. A couple of teams are going to have to overtake them in terms of preventing them reaching the kind of playoffs. I don't know if I necessarily see Ayr or Dunfermline or certainly Raith Rovers managing to achieve that. But I've just been so impressed by them, and Saturday made me understand them a wee bit more, I suppose.
Yeah, very good. Now, up next, Shaughan, Scottish Cup weekend, Aberdeen versus Raith Rovers. You heading up to Pittodrie for it?
I was going to. I have a ticket for it. I can see myself actually just watching it in a pub. I think this will be the only thing that makes me potentially go against that is just the kind of fear of missing out. Like I would hate them on at Pittodrie and I'm no there. But I think this will be a really difficult afternoon for them. I know Aberdeen aren't in a particularly great run of form at this moment in time either. But I think this will be a very comfortable home victory.
And Airdrieonians versus Arbroath.
Based on what I saw on Saturday, and I know Airdrie are a kind of reasonable run of form at this moment in time, but difficult to see past an Arbroath win.
And before we move on from the Championship, Stuart Kettlewell, we talked about him last week's show. He had his second first match as the Ross County manager against Partick Thistle on Friday night. Quite a convincing 2-0 win for the Staggies in this. Jay Henderson with 2 goals, the first coming after 19 seconds. Did you watch the match at all?
I did. I'll be honest, it was very much in the background for the second half. I was kind of paying attention for the first half. I'm impressed by Ross County. Not impressed by Partick Thistle, but regardless, in terms of concentrating on Ross County, interesting the fact that I thought Jay Henderson looked really good, was man of the match, scored 2 goals. Like the fact that he wasn't always starting under Tony Docherty, it is quite interesting. I think if you spread out the 2 games, so I was impressed by them on Friday night. Kettlewell was quite enthusiastic about how they performed. I think they made changes for the midweek game against St Johnstone. St Johnstone are a far better side, to be fair, but St Johnstone had quite a comfortable win, and I think Kettlewell was quite dismissive of his own side in his post-game comments. So maybe he now, I think it feels like he's seen quite a bit of his squad over a couple of games, and maybe he's now starting to realise what will work and what won't work. And as much as the midweek game wasn't a good performance and wasn't a good result, it maybe gives him an idea of maybe players he needs to move on, or players that he certainly can't rely on. So impressed with him on Friday, and as much as I wasn't entirely sure if Kettlewell will work out, he's certainly saying the right things, and Friday was a good first step.
I think so. I think they've set a standard now, Ross County, for the remainder of the season. I know they lost against St Johnstone in the midweek in the KDM Evolution Trophy, but they took on, prior to that, they'd taken on St Johnstone, drew 0-0 with them, then take on Partick Thistle, beat them 2-0. And so you've taken on the 2 best sides in division, 4 points, 2 clean sheets. I think that was their most convincing display of the season against Partick Thistle. But Henderson took his goals very well, very opportunistic strikes. The second one especially, just the ball very kindly breaking to him off Josh Clark, and he was able to finish. And then the only time that Partick Thistle really troubled them was when Sosa was put through in goal, and Carson saved from it, and there's big Alex Samuel banjoing the ball off the bar. Other than that, Partick Thistle were mostly kept at arm's length. So I think that with Kettlewell coming in, playing players in their correct positions, a real novel idea, it might take on. I think that they've set a standard now, and it's important to try and keep that up. But I think that, I've said it before, I'm not going to get too carried away with Ross County's chances, because I do think there is just a real negative energy at the club at the moment. But nevertheless, it's a good start, and it'll be interesting to see if they can follow up against Motherwell the Scottish Cup. Maybe not Motherwell, but after that, away at Morton, and Morton beat them up in Dingwall the last time. So it's a good chance to try and put things. Maybe that's, and Kettlewell going back to Motherwell. Hope his family aren't going to be there.
My prediction for those 2 games is that Kettlewell will get far more venom from the stands than at any point he suffered while Motherwell manager. But then they will rebound and defeat Morton the week after that.
Very good. Now we will move into League One. We talked about it in last week's podcast, but one good turn deserves another. We're going to Palmerston to examine Queen of the South's 3-1 victory over Kelty Hearts. Despite going down to a Craig Johnson goal midway through the first half, Queens rallied after the restart. Scott Brown was the only one handling footballs during this match because Jack Stott pulled them level. Reese Lyon put them in front, and then Liam Smith made sure of the points with a third very late on. Queen of the South have maintained third place. They're on 34 points. They've pulled level with Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, albeit having played 2 games more. Kelty Hearts, meanwhile, still weren't able to build on that impressive win over East Fife. Still stuck at the foot of the table. They are on 13 points. Shaughan, what did you think of Queen of the South 3, Kelty Hearts 1?
In terms of Queen of the South, it's probably, probably a kind of more of the same. Like I know we weren't very complimentary about them at all when they played Steny, and rightly so. And maybe there's a bit about them in terms of where they're struggling big games. Like, I'm not entirely sure. But like their recent form has been quite encouraging. And as much as they went a goal down and were trailing at the interval, I thought it looked like they were the better team in that first half. And then, yes, as much as there was some dubiety about their equaliser, I think they deserved to win. So I was reasonably impressed by them. I suppose you can also say you were impressed by Kelty as well. I do think they've potentially made some decent signings in terms of Sam Fisher, in terms of Dylan Corr. Really interested to see how he gets on, because he has struggled at the Championship in terms of Raith and Morton, albeit he's had injuries and he's very young, so he needs games, and he will get that at Kelty. And they scored an excellent goal. I thought, in terms of a positive, I thought McCarville's run that kind of set up Craig Johnson for that first goal was really, really good. So I think there's positives for both sides, but I thought Queen of South were certainly worthy winners.
I thought this was the perfect match for... We talked about it on last week's show when we talked about the Sensmere beating them 2-0. I think that they would have been very disappointed not to have kept that good run going. I think that was 4 wins, four league wins in the bounds, something like that, and they played really well against Raith Rovers in the Key Game Evolution Trophy and subsequently lost it. Despite losing it, and then to lose against any. Kelty Hearts have been a really good team to go up against, because a team that are, they got a good win against East Fife previously, but the bottom of the table, and I think you summed it up quite well, is Queen of the South are quite good at big dogging other teams. Like the teams that you maybe expect them to win, they tend to. I think it's maybe when they come up against the teams that are directly around them in the table where they perhaps come unstuck. So this was a good result. I think there are a number of good performances there for the likes of like Reese Lyon, taken off last week against Steny, but comes back here. Actually, a really nice goal from that header. Like Liam Smith looked like he had a really positive impact in the game. Jordan Allen they're coming back from fitness, so he's going to be a big boon for them going forward. So all in all, it just felt like just a good win for them. And on top of that as well, to go a goal down, and then for Kelty looked, certainly up until the Stotts equaliser, Kelty were really chucking themselves in front of the ball. Going by the highlights, some of their last ditch defending was really, really good. Like the times where you think somebody's going to score here, and then all of a sudden a player is just coming out of nowhere to chuck himself in front of a shot. So that's really good. It's just that just another defeat, and with Cove Rangers picking up a point against Inverness, Caledonian Thistle, it's difficult for Kelty. And then Michael Tidser, who the assistant manager, who filling in for Tamil Ware wasn't at the game.
I've not seen anything about it, so I've checked. I went on their website. It's not been mentioned. I even read their match report. Maybe I thought maybe somebody's mentioned the match report. Not been mentioned there. No reference to it whatsoever on their social media. So I don't know why Michael Tidser was. Is he standing in? Is he in charge now? I don't really know. I couldn't see any reference to it whatsoever, which is very unusual.
But Tidser sent off because he was complaining about Jack Stott's handball. But we'll come on to that in a wee second. We'll talk about the opening goal first, because you said it was a really good run from Luke McCarville in the middle of the park. And I thought, when you see he beats about 4 players, and he beats 2 with excellent skill, and then 2 by falling over it, and the ball very handily breaking Craig Johnson to finish through the legs of Ross Stewart.
I do think by that point he gets fouled when he reaches the last man. He's fouled, right. And it kind of breaks. It breaks nicely for Craig Johnson. If that hadn't happened, I think advantage was played at that point. I mean, nothing particularly untoward would have happened to the defender. Just would have got brought back for a free kick. But no, I thought his run was excellent. But Johnson's certainly made the most of his advantage, and it was a really good finish. I thought it was just a really good goal. Good goal to watch.
The run reminded me of, do you remember the 1994 World Cup side Al ran?
Yes.
He's scoring against Belgium, and you think this guy's picked up the ball inside his own penalty box and pretty much runs the entire length of the pitch to finish. Like, wow, that's an amazing goal. And basically almost like tackles through players. The ball just keeps on ricocheting off his thighs, so off his shins, before he's able to shoot him into the back of the net. This assist reminded me of Said Al-Waran's goal. So terrible comparison, but maybe you see where I'm going with it.
There was a wee bit of you know how sometimes people say, well, it's better to be lucky than good. Mm-hmm. There was a wee bit of that about it. I suppose I know where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting because the Tids, as we mentioned in his post-match filler info, where he said he was like happy with Kelty's first half performance. He thought they deserved the lead, but he just says that his team weren't able to play through the pressure in the second half. And I think what he was, when Stott equalised, and we'll come on and talk about it because it was in controversial circumstance. I don't think there's any way to get away from that. When they equalised, it just found the team just dropping deeper and deeper and deeper. And that last ditch defending that we spoke about, with players chucking themselves in front of the ball, that can only get you so far. Yeah. But this isn't like Inter Milan versus Barcelona at the Nou Camp. You know, this is Kelty Hearts versus Queen of the South. Very, very different level. And when Kelty were able to breach them, and when the team begins to sort of fall apart, you think there's obviously a lot of brittleness there. Mm-hmm. And I think that O'Weir has acknowledged that after they lost against Cove Rangers when they were beaten 5-2 at New Central Park. He spoke about that there. So it just feels like I don't know how you go about addressing that. I think you've said there. I can't say I've seen much of Dylan Corr, to be honest, but Sam Fisher was on loan at Stennismuir at the tail end of last season. I think that's a really good signing. Really good signing. I thought he was a good defender. I thought he would go to us. He'd been a couple of injury issues and come to us, then go back to Dunfermline and really make an impact. Neil Lennon, though, there was players at that club that Neil Lennon just has no use for. Sam Fisher's one of them. Connor Young, for instance, who went out and loaned to the East Kilbride. But if Fisher might not be quite what Neil Lennon's looking for, certainly be good enough for what Dunfermline are looking for. I mean, it just allows. We spoke about that in our Director of Football Doctors bonus podcast. We said that Kelty Hearts needed central defenders, so they went and signed two of them. and just on top of that as well, it allows Craig Clay to go and play in the middle of the park, where I think he's more comfortable and is a better beneficiary for the team. Obviously, don't have too much of an impact there, but I think going forward, Sam Fisher especially will be a good signing. You've spoken about Dylan Corr there and said that injuries and perhaps a lack of experience have prevented him from getting into the Raith Rovers team. But what kind of defender is he, and what can Kelty Hearts supporters expect from him?
I think, bearing in mind that the season Raith finished second, Ian Murray would rather have played Scott Brown at centre half than actually play Dylan Corr. It gives you a rough idea. But I think he was willing. I think he is inexperienced. I think I'm trying to think of positives that he had. Excuse me. When he was playing for Raith. I'll be honest, I thought he was really poor. I thought he was poor. And you look at what Morton fans are saying of him. And I think what I used to notice was he could play, he wouldn't necessarily do anything wrong for 75 minutes. But then make an egregious error and suddenly you've conceded a goal. So and ultimately that comes out of the fact that he's just a very, very inexperienced centre half. And like, there's certain positions on the park where you play a 21-year-old and you don't really mind. Like, you play a 21-year-old winger, play a 21-year-old central midfielder, a striker. Didn't really mind that. But I think sometimes when you play a young goalkeeper and a young centre half, that's where you start to be worried. And I think Raith and Morton weren't overly fussed. Weren't overly fussed when he left. I think the problem Kelty have here is they need him to be switched on and attentive every single game for 90 minutes, because where I feel particularly sorry for Kelty is we've seen seasons in League One where there's 2 or 3 teams that are just really poor. Like, remember a couple of seasons ago you had like Clyde and Peterhead that were so far away from everybody else in that division, and they were just like 9th and 10th were essentially nailed on, and it was just, well, which order are these two teams going to finish? But they're definitely going to be bottom two. I don't see who Kelty overtake. Like, are they going to overtake Cove? Are they going to overtake Montrose? Are they going to overtake East Fife? I know East Fife are struggling at the moment. I don't see it at all. I think they've fixed the brittleness that you've mentioned defensively. I think that in terms of a squad, they seem to be really diminutive. When I seen them in the Fife derby against East Fife, I think they've kind of remedied that to a degree. Even if they get better defensively, and you would like to think that that's now the case, I still think they struggle to harm teams going forward. So it feels like they're kind of halfway there. But even if they were to bring another couple of forwards that could hurt teams, whether that's still enough to get to that 10th position, I actually have my doubts.
Yeah. I was actually thinking when you mentioned forwards there, what about Rico Dyack? Because I think we'd spoke about whether or not he's exactly what Partick Thistle are looking for, and I think we both came to the conclusion he's probably going to get a couple of shots at Thistle throughout the month and then maybe put back on loan.
Yeah,
I think there might be a degree of hope that that's the case. But the goal, Shaughan, the equalising goal, Jack Stott's goal, mentioned Scott Brown not the only one to use his arm to control a ball before getting a shot away, and it's the same thing that happens here. It's Dylan Corr goes to header the ball, and you can see it clear as day hitting off Jack Stott's arm, and the ball just very fortunately breaks to Curtis Guthrie, and he tees up Stott, shoots from the edge of the area. The ball looks like it's travelling at slow motion the way it actually goes into the net. I actually thought that Kyle Gourley was a wee bit slow in getting down to it. But what I found quite interesting about this, and there's maybe two parts. One, that the fact that the referee didn't spot it. But I thought Jack Bryden's reaction was quite interesting as well, the centre-back partner, because Bryden is screaming for a handball, and I think he is more interested in maybe getting the referee's attention or this infringement that hasn't been flagged than he is trying to stop the shot. Because I think that he's that worked up that he kind of maybe loses concentration. It allows Stott to get in and get the shot. Yeah.
So two things. I can understand why Michael Tidser was so frustrated and why he got his red card, because it's a clear handball. I don't think it's a particularly good header from Corr. That said, Stott's arm is quite above his head, so that's why it stopped. But it's no, he doesn't get great purchase on his header, and then from that point, there's clearly the Kelty defence are more bothered, and not for a huge period of time, but they are more bothered in being aggrieved for a couple of seconds than they are in just say, okay, right, let's concentrate on stopping this period of play. Like that, there's just that switch off for a couple of seconds, and that's all that was required for Queen of South to get the equaliser. And as you say, I think when a team that's especially down near the bottom, when they've got something to hold on to, then they are willing to kind of throw themselves in front of things. And I know it was still 1-1 at that point, but it's just that, not a willingness, but that resilience was broken at that point, and there was probably only going to be one winner.
Yeah, Michael Tidser absolutely seething in his post-match interview. He was annoyed by the referee, and I think that I get the impression Tidser, they've beefed in the past. I get the impression Tidser said that he's been involved in games with this referee in the past, and I think that Tidser doesn't like him. That's the impression that I got from it. Tidser doesn't like him, and I think the fact he doesn't like him maybe led to him protesting more vociferously. I don't know if he thinks the referee's got something against him. He's got something against Kelty Hearts, but he didn't like the referee.
So I picked up on that as well. And just out of interest, I went on to the transfer market website, because that shows you every game that referees have been in charge of.
Ah, right, okay.
And so it was Alistair Grieve was the referee. His record in terms of being in charge of Kelty Hearts matches is actually really good. I think he'd only lost once in 5 matches when he was the referee. And then I thought, well, maybe it was a game when Tidser was in charge of Dunfermline. Nope, that wasn't the case. But I fully appreciate that Tidser has been a player as well, so maybe he's come across him as a player. There's a couple of games where there's maybe 9 yellow cards and 7 yellow cards in a game, even where Kelty have won. So maybe he wasn't happy at how he's refereed the game rather than necessarily the full-time score. But I was trying to look back to see, well, where did Grieve have an impact potentially on Kelty coming out of a game, maybe not getting as much out of the game as Tids have thought they would, and I was struggling to find it, but obviously Tids will know better than me, but I did think that was interesting as well.
Yeah, the second goal as well is there seemed to be that inevitability after conceding an equaliser that would go on and concede more, and it's quite a sloppy goal to concede. It felt as though Kelty had a number of chances to hack the ball clear.
Still a wee bit lucky, you're right, but still a wee bit fortunate as well in terms of how it was eventually headed in.
You know, I was thinking about that as well. I actually think it's a really, really nice finish from Rhys Lyon, because Jack Stott effectively must be standing about 3 or 4 yards away from him when he headers it, and he headers it right into Rhys Lyon, who just very quickly flicks it into the net. So I think that when something happens that close to you don't have very much time to react. So for him to be able to actually direct it away from the goalkeeper into it, I actually think it's really well played from Rhys Lyon.
I don't know if he did direct it. I thought it maybe just hit him. But I don't know. So let's give him a benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was very well directed. I just thought it kind of come off the side of his fizzog and went past Kyle Gourley.
Right, Rhys Lyon, we know you listen to this podcast every week. Get in touch with myself and Shaughan and let us know, did you mean to header that ball in, or did it just happen? Were you in the right place at the right time and it just happened to flick off you? Actually, reading the notes I've got for the game, I forgot that Kelty had an excellent chance to equalise it. Maybe it shows we've talked a bit about Queen of the South's prowess going forward and the resilience coming back from the goal down. There's a great piece of defending from Jack Hanna. There's a nice bit of play from McCarville, gets to the byline, plays the ball across the face of goal. Joseph Teasdale is, I think, about 6 yards, waiting to smash that ball into the net. Hanna comes out of nowhere, puts the ball out for a corner. Really, really strong defending there from Jack Hanna.
Yeah, you're right. And as much as Kelty weren't always on the front foot, I suppose they were never out of it until that third goal, I suppose. But you're right, they had to be, like Queen of the South had to be switched on at that point when Kelty had to go for it. But I watched the highlights. I do think if Kelty had got anything from the game, it might have been a wee bit of an injustice to the Doonhamers.
Yeah, and Liam Smith, as you mentioned, putting the tin lid on the scoreline there. Nice wee bit of exchange of passes with Ewan Ron's controls and finishes from close range. And after that, we got 10-minute Peter Murphy interview. Peter, come on the Terrace podcast. Come on the Terrace podcast, mate. You are the Glens League One Manager of the Month. Come on the Terrace podcast. We'd love to speak to you. But we've got 10 minutes of grinning Pete. And not too much. I think he was annoyed about losing the opening goal. Still annoyed at having lost to Stennismuir the previous week. But I found it quite interesting. He seemed quite annoyed by some of the shouts. Beg your pardon. He seemed quite annoyed by some of the shouts from the crowd after going a goal down, which I found quite interesting. I think that there's that sort of sense of anxiety at Palmerston at the moment towards maybe him, towards how the season's going so far. So when you go a goal down to the worst side in the division, you get that wee bit antsy, and that manifests itself by sort of jeering from the crowd.
But the thing is, it's not even a shout because you're a goal down against a team that's bottom of the league. This has now been going on. This has been rumbling on for seasons and seasons now that Queen of South have been in a full-time team in League One. I don't know if it's necessarily appearing the case that they're going to manage to lift themselves out of the division this time around. Their football is, by and large, not particularly exciting. You're on the back of a 2-0 loss to Steny the week before, so I can completely understand why fans are maybe giving Peter Murphy a bit of stick. I did laugh when he said, because he said something along the lines of supporter, or maybe a supporter rather than supporters, shouted that this team's bottom league, and he went, however, this team will take points off of everybody else in the division. And I had to look back. At like Kelly's season to date, and they've lost so many games. Barely won any games and barely drawn any games. So I don't know if they will. He did, in fairness to him, he did talk about the fact that they've brought in additional players like Dylan Corr and Sam Fisher, so they will get better. That's what he said. So I will maybe I'm jumping on his comments too quickly, but I'm not sure they will take off loads of points off of other teams. But regardless, as much as they were a goal down at half time, I still thought they were a better team, and they were worthy winners at 3-1.
Up next, the Scottish Cup weekend. No game for Queen of the South. They were knocked out by Dunfermline Athletic in the previous round. I think Murphy was asked about that in his post-match, and he said that it's... I can't remember what did he say about would they much rather have the game. I think he said it was who's I can't remember. He said that maybe I've been listening to so many manager interviews in my head. No, it's Michael McIndoe that talks about how they'd much rather have a game. That is it. My head's absolutely fried with post-match managerial interviews. God, that's like you get a 10-minute match, a 10-minute post-match of Peter Murphy, and that is you. Just absolutely
before you even get to that, I thought Jordan Allen's interview was really good with Sandra.
I didn't watch that. What did he say?
Only 3.5 minutes, but she was literally like kind of talking about the fact that that was his first. Has he played at all this season? Did he play maybe like the first couple of games or maybe not at all? But regardless, it was his first appearance in so long. And she was saying, how do you feel to be coming back? He was talking about the fact that obviously he was delighted.
Shaughan, first appearance of the season.
He was talking about the fact that it's been a really hard time for him. He feels he's had so much support from the players around him. And Sandra mentioned the fact that even though he hasn't been available, he goes to every game. He goes to every game home and away. And he was just saying, well, like a lot of the time I've had to train on my own. He goes, that's really hard. He goes, so I didn't have to go to the games on a Saturday, but I wanted to because I just wanted to be around everybody else. He goes, so it was great just to be on the park for the first time in a long time. So that was a really good interview. I enjoyed it.
No, very good. Well, very good. It's good to say, quite ominous, maybe for the rest of the division. But Jordan Allen is a good striker, and I think that it certainly helps Queens because I think that he'll certainly give something very different to Curtis Guthrie. Before we move on, Shaughan, we've kind of touched on it there. The battle at the top of the table. Two very interesting results. Inverness Caledonian Thistle dropping points at Cove Rangers. Drawn that match 0-0, and Stenhousemuir beating East Fife 5-0. Do you want to briefly talk about those games? Can we briefly talk about those games?
It's safe to say that Inverness are stuttering. The fact that they were able to bring back Alfie Stewart?
Alfie Stewart. Yeah.
The fact that he's come back in is because I think there was some concern that maybe he wouldn't come back or maybe he would go, not necessarily stay at Aberdeen, but go elsewhere. I think that is that's good for them. That helps them going forward. But there's no getting away from the fact that that's 3 league games in a row where they haven't managed to win a lot of drop points.
They could have lost that match as well at the weekend. There's Mitch Megginson hit the post. I think it was that's really bad.
Ross Monroe saved a penalty in the last minute.
Yeah, Ross Monroe saved a penalty, so they were dug out of him, so they could have easily lost that match as well. I think there's perhaps a worry that Scott Kelleher's maybe not getting the best out of the team, or maybe from what I saw when the Warriors beat them a couple of weeks ago, he felt quite one-dimensional. It just felt like get the ball out wide and then try to make something happen there. I don't know.
It was interesting that remember last season where it looked like when was it now? Yeah, sorry, last season when it looked like they were absolutely going to stay up. Like we were talking about them, even with that points deduction, potentially long shots to finish in the top 4 because their form had been so good.
Yeah.
And then when it felt fairly obvious they were going to stay up, and then suddenly it was almost like they relaxed a bit too much and their form dipped. And I suppose there is a similar scenario again this season where I think everybody in their dog thought, right, okay, Inverness are now going to win the league. And again, it just feels like the performances have started to drop off. Whether if that's a long-term thing, then they're in big trouble because Stenny's very good. Queen of South, albeit they're a poor result last weekend, like they are on a good run of form. So I don't think that'll be the case. I think they will rediscover their form.
Yeah.
I think they just need to, as much as they want to be a wee bit fortunate against Cove, I still think they create enough chances to win most games. So as long as they can rediscover their kind of goal scoring touch again, I think they'll be fine. But the longer this run goes, then the more I maybe start to doubt myself, and maybe they start to doubt themselves.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I hope this run continues indefinitely for Inverness Caledonian Thistle. But no, in all seriousness, they're still the favourites to win the table. I think there's slumps. I mean, they're 3 points behind Stenhousemuir at the top of the table with 2 games in hand. Yeah. They're evidently a very good side. And I understand if you're watching them on a week-by-week basis and you've watched the last 3 games, there's perhaps a cause for concern there. But, what was going to say? Bad times don't last, but bad guys do. I'm quoting Scott Hall when he got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. It makes absolutely no sense, no relevance to the discussion. But in the end, Inverness Caledonian Thistle will be all right. Did you get a chance to see the highlights from Stennismuir's 5-0 win over East Fife?
Yes, I did. I thought Stenny looked absolutely excellent, and I thought that Dick Campbell's post-match interview was really interesting.
Yes, we have to address them two completely separate points, because one was incredible. In fact, they were both incredible for very different reasons. I thought the match, the first half hour or so, not a lot happened. East Fife maybe have marginally been the better of the two sides. I think they maybe had exerted slightly more pressure, but maybe in a way where it's like 54, like the Brexit referendum, 52-48 in that way. So not exactly a landslide, but nevertheless, but just marginally the better side. But then Scott McGill, I think this is one of the assists of the season. And yeah, you can maybe say that East Fife didn't put any pressure on him. I mean, he's allowed to do 2 360-degree turns in the middle of the park to assess his options. But he takes 6 players out of the game with this pass for Ross Taylor to run on to. 6 players out of the game for Ross Taylor to touch and finish. And from that point on, there was only one team that was ever going to win it. And Stennismuir, Taylor's 2 goals were excellent. Taylor had a really good game. Taylor was a really, really good 2 goals and then an assist in the second half for Ollie White. Dale Carrick scored with his first touch, a brilliant counter-attack. Ollie Simpson's cross and Carrick finishing, and big Nicky Jameson getting a header at the end. Another goal. So Stennismuir in a really, really good place just now. But I tell you who's not going to be in a good place. The East Fife players, once Dick Campbell coaches them how to be faster. I like to see that. I'd really like to see how he's going to manage that.
I'd read about his interview. I'd seen some comments about his interview. I was really looking forward to watching this. To start with, I didn't think it was quite as bad as the comments suggested. But then when he said, I've got slow players, I didn't have a lot of pace in the team, and he said, I need to bring those players in or just coach it into them. I was like, I don't know how you're going to coach pace into the players that you have available. Better, you can coach them a bit better. You can give them more structure, perhaps. You can give them ideas, make them quicker. That feels like a struggle.
I honestly, how do you coach someone to be faster? Again, if you are a track and field coach listening to this podcast alongside Reece Lyon, do get in touch with us and let us know how you achieve that.
All you can maybe do is, because I've actually been thinking about this since I listened to it, you could, if he was to get maybe big tyres and then strap it to the player's back and then they run with tyres, and then like all the time in training, they're constantly just training with these tyres on the back. And then on a Saturday, obviously they don't have tyres, and I think, wow, this is incredible. And then maybe they would be quicker at that point. But I struggle to believe that that's what he's going to do.
But you see the players on, they've got parachutes on their back. I was thinking maybe they could train with the parachutes on the back. They just get tangled up in one another and somebody gets trapped in a parachute and it's all just very, very, very fussy. But how do you coach someone to be faster? Just very, very surreal post-match interview from him. But sorry, Shaughan, we forgot to mention the Scottish Cup. We talked about Queen of South being knocked out by Dunfermline Athletic. Mentioned Kelty Hearts versus Cove Rangers in the Scottish Cup.
I think as much as I think Kelty have brought in some decent signings, as much as I think they have improved, I think Cove are on a decent one. I think Fivey was back
yes,
at
he
the
was.
weekend as well. So I think that Cove will progress here.
And on top of that, Adam Emsley sticking around for the rest of the season.
I'm stunned at that.
Ross County. Yeah, I
genuinely
thought
surprised at that.
Similar to like you guys like Rico Dyack going back to Partick Thistle, or maybe Oisin Smith going back to St Mirren. Maybe you come in, get a look at them, and then maybe send them back. So to just basically say to Emsley, no, just stick about with Cove. It's strange signing, because he is having by all measure a very good season.
And the thing is as well, that must be now. I was going to say 3 managers that's passed up on him, but that won't be the case, because it would have been Don Cowie sent him out on loan.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose Tony Docherty didn't have the opportunity to recall him. Maybe he would have done in January, but Kettlewell has decided not to. I just find that really, really surprising. Considering like how everybody knew he was good before this season. Andy's having a really, really good season in League One with Cove. was exceptional against St Johnstone, obviously the best team in the Championship a few weeks ago in the Scottish Cup. I thought he would have wanted a look at him, but here we are.
Here we are indeed. And there we are for our final game. We're discussing Edinburgh City's 4-1 home defeat to Stirling Albion. Although Uzi C put the Citizens ahead on his 5th debut for the club, remarkable, they capitulated. Russell McLean scored a hat-trick and Ross Cunningham got another to give the Beanos a pretty deserved victory in the end. Edinburgh City still bottom of the division. They have 12 points. They're 5 behind Dumbarton in 9th place, having played a game more. Those two sides are meeting very soon as well, so can't wait to see that. Stirling Albion, very good form at the moment, taking 10 points from the last 4 matches. They've climbed the table to 6th place with 23 points. Shaughan McGuigan, thoughts on Edinburgh City 1, Stirling Albion 4?
I mean, fair play to Stirling Albion, first of all. It felt like that Maybury, like you just presumed that Maybury was going to have to move on. Their form was really poor. It felt like they were very much a team that Edinburgh could have caught up and potentially finished bottom of that table. Also, there was a toxicity, I suppose, between like the fan base and the kind of coaching team that probably wasn't helped by the appointment of Mark Kerr as a coach. I don't think that's went down particularly well. But if you remember,
nor should it be actually.
No,
to be honest.
Totally. But even I'm sure it was even before Mark Kerr was appointed. There was that really kind of unsavoury incident where somebody posted online about it was like the Ku Klux Klan and the kind of coaching team.
Horrible.
Like really, really horrible stuff. So you presume that, but right, there's probably no way back here for Alan Maybury. However, as you say, 10 points out of 12, I think that's 3 wins in a row. And suddenly you're like, right, well, I'm not entirely sure that Stirling Albion are a team that the Edinburgh are going to be able to catch it. And maybe the Stirling Albion should be looking up the way rather than behind themselves. And as for Edinburgh, I think they're a weird team to get a gauge on. Like their home form's dreadful, but I do think that two things can be right at the same time. Like they're not, as Michael McIndoe said, if it wasn't for that 15-point deduction, they would be 4th. And they're only about 1 point worse off now than they were last season. And last season, everybody was very complimentary about them. We've been complimentary about them then. We've been complimentary about them this season. But I do think that based on what we've seen from them so far, like that's a pretty significant caveat, that 15-point deduction. And I just think if they continue to go along as they're playing now, which is very much kind of hot and cold, then that isn't going to be enough to save them the way that, and not even just their recent form. I think their form from August to now, I don't know that sees them escape from this 10th place. He talked about their collapse and the fact that we've seen it like a number of times this season, and this was a perfect example where they looked like far and away the better side in the first half, but the second half I thought it looked pretty rank.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that. And what I find perhaps the most unfathomable thing about Edinburgh City is why they're so poor at Meadowbank.
Yeah.
I was looking at the league table. See, away from home, they've got the joint best record in the division alongside the Spartans, taking 21 points on the road, which is very, very impressive. How can you only take 6 points from home? How can you only win one game all season at Meadowbank? I just cannot. I can't get my head around it. I don't know if it's. I mean, it wasn't an issue last season, and so how can you possibly explain that?
It feels like it maybe just becomes a habit. Like
it
maybe
might
it's
just one of those things
like,
where it becomes a thing where it's like things go on so long. Christ, we're playing at home. These are games we tend to lose, and then it becomes a thing. You know,
I was thinking as well in terms of, and as much as in terms of their results aren't necessarily that much different from last season. I hadn't looked at like how many goals it feels like they've conceded a lot more goals, and although they were doing well last season, it felt like they were quite reliant on Mark Weir. Like they had a huge amount of clean sheets, and I don't think Mark Weir's had a poor season, but it feels like he hasn't quite been up to the standards of the last campaign. And if that's the case with your goalkeeper, then suddenly those games last season where maybe they were sneaking a draw or sneaking a win, then suddenly they're reversed this time around, which doesn't help. But there is you can't quite put your finger on it, but I'm hugely concerned about Edinburgh going forward.
Just looking at that, Shaughan, 2 clean sheets all season, both away from home, one against the Spartans, one against Stirling Albion. And
I don't think it's all to do with Mark Weir, incidentally.
No.
They're defending, as a unit, they're defending a lot poorer than they were last campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose that coming at this game, no Lewis MacArthur, no Quinn Mitchell, so necessitated Bradley Barrett having to play at left back, and I think who was the other player that had to come in?
Was it Walker, Sulan, Lynch was the rest of the back four?
Yeah, it was Jamie Walker. That was right. It was Jamie Walker having to play at centre back, and he's a fullback, so he's been playing at position. But he said that the players been filled in positions before, but nevertheless, it should be an excuse for the calibre of the goals they lost. And it's one of the things I find, like, I am a huge fan of Michael McIndoe's, but the thing that I'm finding quite interesting, this is the first time you've really heard him dig out his players.
Uh-huh.
You know, he's accused the players of bottling the opportunity to go, like, narrow that gap between 9th and 10th. And you know, the one I can't remember, it was after they lost against Camelin, or was against a league match where he said that this is a warning to the players, because if you can't do what we want, we're going to sign better players.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if I've seen some talking on Pine above the word, just if his message just isn't resonating the same way it did. It's just that when the team have found adversity, he's been brilliant at galvanising them, and it feels it's a very, like, we're all in this together. But for this to talk about, like, the sloppy goals they lost, and yeah, we can come on and talk about them. I don't necessarily think that certainly Russell McLean did not have to work hard, didn't even need to move for actually for the 3 goals that he scored. But you know, when you've got a big strike like that who doesn't really need to do much, that's a concern. But it's just the language is interesting, just like hearing the way him discussed how the season's going.
It just feels like there is a negative vibe about Edinburgh at this moment in time, and that's to be expected. They're bottom of the league, and there's a 5-point gap between them and Dumbarton, and everybody above them has games in hand. So it would be quite unusual if there wasn't a negative vibe. And I know he did try to throw in positives about the fact that, well, we would have been 4th if not for the 15-point deduction. Hard to get away from that caveat, though. And what I was wondering about Michael McIndoe is, like, they'd done so well last season, and like we met him at the end of the campaign, and we were in his company for a bit, and we, in terms of his vision, and in terms of how he describes things, and in terms of how he tries to get buy-in, I don't know if eccentric is necessarily the right word, but he certainly has a unique way of delivering his message. Yes, absolutely. And as much as I thought, wow, this guy's amazing, I also think he's quite a hard taskmaster. Mm-hmm. And with all that being the case, I would imagine that being in his company and being in his dressing room when things are going well, it is probably hard, but also he can get buy-in from everybody. Mm-hmm. But maybe when things aren't going so well and the message becomes even tougher, maybe that unorthodox way that he goes about delivering his message, whether players are quite so keen on it when things aren't going so well, I don't know. And that's just a total guess. But there's definitely a real negative vibe I feel coming from Edinburgh at this moment in time.
No, it's hard. It's hard to put your finger on. I'm thinking back to when he's got the play, when he's happy with his players, just like his post-match interviews, which says how basically you get the window into what he's thinking. Uh-huh. They're so good. I just remember that the post-match interview after the Stranraer game, where they got the first one of the season to chip away at that 15-point deduction, and just it was like, so like, this is a message for the rest of the teams in the division. We're coming to hunt you. And you're just thinking, fucking let's do it. If you're a player, like, right, let's do it. But a lot of that time, it's like easier said than done. And you just get sort of caught into the rigmarole of like the season. And then it's like you chip away, right, that's us, we've got our 15 points. And then it feels like, right, now the season really starts. Yeah. I think that can be quite difficult. Mm-hmm. And on top of that as well, not to bring in Stennis Muir again, but I think that, see, in terms of setting standards, like, Gregor Buchanan has been amazing at it. Ross Meakin, brilliant. Dale Carrick coming in. They're like the senior, a lot of younger players in the team, but they're the senior guys, and I think they set an example really well. Now, I'm not really critical of the guys at Edinburgh, because I'm sure they look after themselves and take their football really seriously, but there's like a reason why these guys are playing further up a level, because their standards are so high. And I don't know, I sound like I'm being critical, I don't mean to be, but maybe it's just that McIndoe just wants more from his players and he just can't get it from them, and he's in the position where money's been spent on signing players, and he's just not getting it. I mean, it feels like it feels like Edinburgh need to be unorthodox and unconventional for it to work. Like, they need to have only one sub on the bench and everyone works well. The more they have, the worse it gets.
The thing is, though, like, so Elgin's 8th. Like, Elgin have... Elgin's only played 18 games, so they've played 2 games fewer than Edinburgh. They've got 20 points. So if they can repeat that, if they can get another 20 points as a minimum, that means that Edinburgh's going to have to get to like 55 and hope they have a better goal difference. So what teams are they going to finish above? And if it's not Dumbarton, you're struggling to see who else they can reel in. Like Forfar, but it doesn't look like they can reel in like Stirling Albion, for example. I struggle to see who they're going to be able to overtake, unless they can go on. Like he's talked about, we'd be top 4. They're probably going over the next 16 games. They're probably going to have to be almost title winning form to reel in more than 1 or 2 teams. And you haven't seen any evidence of that from them so far.
I think he said this in his post-match as well, and by the way, I'll just PayPal you, I'll wire that 20 quid actually, just as soon as we finish this. But I think he'd said, I got this mixed up between him and Peter Murphy, but he's glad for the break to allow the new players a chance to bed in with the existing squad, but he'd much rather be playing a league game. And I suppose it's like a way where you've lost one, you're just chasing that high. So listen, let's get the next game, let's win it. But the break might be good. See, like at the weekend, where the other teams in the Scottish Cup, I don't know what you do. Do you take the players out for a meal? I don't know, something like that. Take them out for pints, just so everyone can bed in and get to know one another a wee better. A team building exercise, foster that positive spirit. Because that's certainly something that Edinburgh, you might question, if the message still resonating. I don't think you can really question like the team spirit with one another. We've seen the various wagon wheels over the course of the season. That team are very much in it together. But I don't know if you've got 3 new guys in Uzi C. Uzi C's not really a new guy, but you've got 3 guys that aren't familiar. In fact, Ollie McDonald had played for Edinburgh City for a year. Right, so you've got 2 new guys and 2 old guys that are coming in. But maybe you just need a reset. Maybe it's just that just going for a night out with the guys and just letting them all just have a laugh.
I would imagine they'll do something. It'll be something that we wouldn't think about. It maybe won't be pints. It might be paragliding. It'll be something that he's thought of that nobody else would, and hopefully it's a success.
Volunteering at a dog shelter for the day.
I'd like that. That'd be class.
That would be good. Send the cameras in there to get it.
Get Aaron in to film that.
Yes, aye. But I do hope they can. Of course, Edinburgh, my second favourite team in the SPFL. There's no been speaking so highly about them for the last season. I hope he can turn it. Still very, very high hopes for the manager and for this group of players. It is a slump and it is frustrating. I think that's the big thing. It's frustrating that them being able to they've had tons of opportunities to call it, like against Stranraer, for instance, at the to only draw 1-1 with them. I know Stranraer are generally on a good run of form at the moment, but to the teams that you'd be looking at and thinking, yes, they're within our orbit, for want of a better expression. Yeah. We should be able to beat Stranraer. Stirling Albion, we should be able to reel in Stirling Albion, and to not be able to do that is really alarming, and especially as well when you go a goal up. To capitulate like that in the way they did. I mean, Uzi C's goal, I think it's just before the interval, very well taken, was Zaid playing a really, really cute pass towards the 6-yard box. And C, I couldn't tell if he gets a break of the ball off Lee Hamilton, but he seems to get the wee break of the ball and then just finishes for close range. And what I liked that is he celebrates by shushing the young team and the away fans. I wonder if that'll come back to haunt him.
The talking about fans, see, was it the... Have you watched the... I think you've watched the Edinburgh City highlights, yeah? Was it, there won't be Stirling Albion highlights, will there? The Edinburgh City highlights.
It's the Edinburgh City highlights. I know exactly what you're going to talk about here.
At the third goal.
At the third goal, yes.
And it's not a commentator, is it? But it's like somebody
very close. Somebody very close to the microphones.
But it doesn't just feel like that the microphone is picking it up. It's like somebody has stolen the microphone away to make a point that they think is very salient. And because basically at every Stirling Albion goal, like a bunch of Stirling Albion fans kind of run on the park, a kind of handful of fans. And by the third goal, somebody's clearly annoyed by it. And they go, see if these cunts were doing their job right, they would be lifted and thrown them out, which I presume he's talking about stewards, but he is very frustrated by that third goal.
That's it. Just see if they cunts were doing their job right, they'd be lifting them and throwing them out.
Furious. Absolutely furious.
Very, 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 very funny. I suppose that's the thing at Meadowbank, when the camera actually from the Edinburgh City highlights cuts to them, you just see these like these young team just standing at the barrier, and that's the thing at Edinburgh. It's very, very easy to get onto the pitch. I mean, did Shaughan do that? Like when they scored their last minute winner against him, this guy who was but his mid-40s wearing a gilet, sort of celebrating.
I didn't even think the Stirling Albion young team looked that young.
Well,
they look like they look like maybe like early 20s goths.
Mm-hmm. But some of them did look very pale. But in terms of a comeback, I think it's really impressive from Stirling Albion. Having seen them on Tuesday night against the Warriors in the KDM Elevation Trophy, since we won that match 2-1, and for the first 10-15 minutes or so, it looked like there was a huge gap between the sides. But once Stenny scored, Stirling Albion settled into the game quite well and actually caused problems. You can see what they tried to do. You've got McLean up there. I know this would have really stung for a lot of Edinburgh City fans because Russell McLean is not well regarded amongst the citizens. But you've got Russell McLean in there, and he's got his uses. He's quite chaotic in what he does. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of the time he'll look for a foul. Like a lot of time he'll go back and looking for a foul. There's other times where he can have a flick on or a touch, and it looks wonderful. It looks so slick, very Ibrahimovic-like. And I think in this game, while you can do that, there wasn't any chaos or any nonsense with this. It was just really, the goals were really easy for him to score. I mean, the balls in the two corners, brilliant corners in from Adam Brown. Brown's set pieces are just excellent, man. We think, what was the numbers last season? It was something like 14 or 15 goals and assists last season for Stirling Albion. Really good. A hat-trick of assists in this game, Adam Brown. Really, really impressive performance. But the goals are really easy to score from Brown, from McLean. It's like the first one, really good ball into the box. He seems to pin Sula, or he seems to stop Sula from jumping. Makes it difficult for him to come into contact, and then boom, heads home. Yep. And then the second one, I mean, he runs into the box. He seems to hit off his shoulder or the back of his head.
It almost feels like he kind of, he swivels. He kind of burrows round as the ball's approaching him. And you're right, it either comes off his shoulder or the kind of nape of his neck, which is a weird way to finish a goal. It was very similar to the first one, but he scored it with his back to goal, which is, I suppose, a skill in itself.
Yes, aye. The third goal, really good finish from Ross Cunningham. Good play from Adam Brown. Adam Brown's not going to beat anyone for pace, but if you can basically hold the ball up and then get your mate to come in and score a really good effort, then you'll do a good turn. That's when the young team were on the pitch. That's when the old boy shouts. And I thought that the fourth goal was actually really good. The ball worked really well down to the right byline. Ryan Shanley getting onto the line, but basically giving McLean a tap-in for his hat-trick.
It was interesting that Alan Maybury said something along the lines of they've been working really hard to, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically they've been trying to come up with a plan where they can keep Shanley and McLean on the park and try and get them to combine together. It feels like that maybe that's starting to come to fruition. Certainly McLean's numbers are exceptional this season. Whether is that good, I don't know, but he's having an incredible season so far, and the way League Two is, we've went from thinking, right, well, okay, Edinburgh could potentially reel them in. Maybe they'll finish as Club 42. They're now only 2 points behind Shaughan. Shaughn's sitting in fourth. So now it's not a ridiculous suggestion to think that maybe they could finish the top four.
Yeah, it's the from 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. It's all quite bunched up there.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason to say why Stirling and Albion couldn't. I mean, they've got a good goalkeeper in Derek Gaston. You've got if you've got someone like if you've got big boys in the team, and I'm thinking they like guys like Lee Hamilton, Kyle Banner, Russell McLean, and you've got somebody that's really good, just who's got an excellent delivery in Adam Brown. Yeah. We saw it last night. You actually there's times you think, Christ, he's so good from dead balls, just the way he can hit them really powerfully with swerve. They're quite deceptive for goalkeepers, and quite deceptive for goalkeepers and easy for attackers to attack. You got someone like that, you can make a big difference. It's just that I think that they're quite a slow team. I don't think there's all that much pace in them there, so they can be got at. I think, particularly in the middle of the park as well, there's not a lot of legs there. So I said they still have their issues.
The other thing I was going to say was, like, often we'll say, maybe more than any other area in terms of lower leagues, and especially maybe like League 1, League 2, teams might like lean on their experienced players. But see somebody like Callum Crane at Stirling Albion, it always feels like that he, and not so much this weekend, to be fair, but the amount of times I've watched Stirling Albion this season, and Callum Crane just looks like he is desperate to get sent off. Like, some of his tackles are absolutely dreadful, and it feels like he just red mist descends upon him, and he struggles to control his behaviours at some point. So it feels like maybe some of the more experienced players, or certainly in the case of Callum Crane, isn't maybe somebody you can rely upon, and that will definitely it has cost them, and potentially could cost them going forward as well.
I imagine Callum Crane sits in the dressing room punching himself in the face before he goes out to play games. You're right, he does seem to be wired. There was we covered one of their games when he put in there was one he tried to do someone. That was it. There was a game, I can't remember who it was, that just sparked in my head. There was a game where he really tried to hurt them, and I think they managed to get away with it, and thankfully the player wasn't hurt.
If he would just concentrate on punching himself in the face rather than kicking opponents, they might be fine for the rest of the season, but my goodness, he needs to calm down.
Yeah, now a free weekend, Shaughan, for both teams because of the Scottish Cup. But up next, Edinburgh City versus Annan Athletic in 2 weeks.
Who's at home?
It's Edinburgh City at Meadowbank.
Annan Athletic.
Okay. And then Stirling Albion are at home to East Kilbride. In fact, that's this weekend, in fact. Beg your pardon, that's this weekend.
Regardless of the positive things I've said about Stirling, do you know some East Kilbride haven't played for a few weeks? I'm sure actually I've seen something that would they try to get a friendly during the week against somebody. You know something, I'm going to say that the East Kilbride will be caught cold, and Stirling will continue their good form and will take something from this game, whether it's a draw or a home win.
Just on East Kilbride, just before we wrap up, I'd meant to say in last week when we talked about their transfer business, they signed Ben Williamson from Hamilton Academical. I just wanted to say, I should have said this last week, but it's actually really good to see him back playing football again, because I think the last time we spoke about him, he'd been in a really serious car accident, and I think he broke his leg. So it's good that he is able to get back playing, and hopefully he can contribute in some capacity for East Kilbride. He looks like an East Kilbride player, certainly.
Yes, he looks like who was the Lemmy character that was like a kind of fantasy with that kind of will-o'-the-wisp beard? Yes, looks like Falconhoof with that beard. But regardless, I'm criticising his facial hair. As you see, I'm delighted to see him back as well. Fair play.
That's class, man. Hopefully he can do them a good turn and take the club where they think they want to be. But Shaughan, that should do us for the time being.
Class.
All right, thank you very much for listening. Shaughan and I will no doubt be back in the very near future to talk about some lower league Scottish football. We've got nothing else going on in our lives, so why not keep the marks happy? Remember, subscribe to Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. For as little as £2 per month, you can access hundreds of hours of world-class football content, including, we're just about to record, our attempts to build a team of lower league players that will win the World Cup for Scotland. So get your checkbook out.
A real struggle.
Not for me, it wasn't. I actually had too many players. Shaughan, thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you.
And you listening at home, on a bus, in the gym, perhaps, if that's how you spend your time, thank you very much. Enjoy your football, but unlike those manky, as far as I was going to call them manky bastards, I don't know about that hell. Unlike the guys that sit in front of Shaughan at Starks Park and slag off Josh Mullen, enjoy your football, but please do so respectfully. Thank you. Hope you keep yourselves clean, guys.